Okay, as NASCAR fans, we can all agree that NASCAR has had many problems the last few years with the quality of show they put on every week. If there's a lot of passing, cars are having a lot of aero issues, a lot of fuel mileage races, and we all know that as far as race fans go, that is not what they want. They want to go there, see action-packed weekends every weekend, competitive races. Yes, some go see wrecks as racers. We don't like wrecks, but that is part of the sport. And NASCAR has kept grasping at straws, shall you say, trying to figure out what can we do to put people back in the seats. And they still have not hit the mark because we're still seeing dwindling attendance. Now they're starting doubleheader weekends, like for Pocono this year. And the problem is those are gimmicky items. That's not the true cure to a motorsports issue. That's more like how you would solve ball, a stick and ball, or a sport like baseball, or hockey, or football. But in this case, to fix motorsports, it usually comes down to the competition that we put out on the track every week. Now, we all know from watching dirt late model racing and local dirt track races around the country that every week, no matter if it's from the local guy that spends $3,000 on a race car and just goes out to have fun, all the way up to the Lucas Oil or World of Outlaw late model teams, that they go out, put on a heck of a show every week, condensed version, and they do it actually multiple times a week. But there's always people in the stands. They're always paying to go see it because we don't use gimmicky ways of making the racing competitive. We don't have playoffs. We don't have stage points. We just go out, put out a good evening, have fun, and do it multiple times a week. Like I said, even sometimes 3, 4 a week in a row in one location, depending on what the event is. And yet NASCAR can't seem to figure out how to get it right for 36 weekends in a year individually. So I have kind of come up with a list of what I think NASCAR should do, or could potentially do, that could potentially put fans back in the seats. Because it truly pains me to watch a race at Darlington, one of the most famed racetracks on the circuit, and to see the stands are empty. Or Daytona, when I was watching clips of the Busch Clash. I mean, not hardly anybody there. They used to fill those grandstands for the Busch Clash alone. So, on my whiteboard here, as you can see, I have my list of ideas on what I think should be changed. Starting off with the first thing. Eliminate the playoffs in stage racing. Return to a 36 race championship using a 1 point position per position formula. Now, what that means is for those that did not know NASCAR prior to 2003, NASCAR used to run on a 36 race season point standing. Now, that didn't mean there was a playoff at 10 races or stage points. You just scored your race points. You had a potential of scoring 160 in a race, depending on how, if you led most laps, laps led, period, and finished first. So, under that, Matt Kenseth in the 17 car in the DeWalt Ford for Roush Fenway Racing had won the championship 2 weeks removed from the end of the season at Homestead Miami Speedway. Now, a lot of people were saying, well, we can't have that, because Jeff Gordon won how many more races, and, Matt Kenseth only won one. But the difference was Matt Kenseth only failed to finish one race. That's right, 1 out of 36. He completed 35 races running out of 36, which is a phenomenal feat and should be applauded by any racer, because anytime he can make it that far into a season and not get wrecked out but once, you're doing pretty good. So it sparked a change by NASCAR saying, well, we got to have the chase. So there came the chase for the Nextel Cup. Now, that turned into a gimmick of, we race for 26 weeks, and then the top 10 remaining, who are in the top 10, then get a chance to race for the championship. Well, what they found out was, after a while, that during those top 10 races, or those last 10 races, well, generally it hadn't changed the sport a lot. The only difference was the points championship was a little closer, unless somebody did like Tony Stewart did in 2011, where you just take off and you win 5 out of 10 races, and just sweep the deal. and make it very competitive that way. But I mean, granted, he worked his way back. But I mean, there was turning out to times like Jimmy Johnson was just on cruise control. I mean, there was no way anybody was catching him during the title. Now, so then they came up with well, maybe we should have stages in the championship chase where after 3 races, you get eliminated if you're not within the top group. So then they changed the chase over to 16 cars. And then that way, after 3 races, you eliminated 3 or 4, and then or 4 actually, and then you eliminated another 4 after 6 races, and then all the way down to the championship 4, who then the 4 of them get to race for the title with the highest finisher of them 4 winning the title. Now, as a racer, that's not the fairest way to do it, because we put in a full body of work during a whole season to accumulate top 10s, top 15s, wins, top 5s, and to have it all thrown away because we have 1 or 2 bad races in a row, or we just get unlucky. We're prime position, and you get taken out at Talladega. What do you do? Not in the chase. All because of somebody else's mistake. You don't make it. Even though your full body of work for 36 races said you were a championship-worthy driver. So, my recommendation is, and then also to add to that, they decided to add in the stage points, make it more interesting. Well, all that did was allow some drivers in playoff points to carry over and more or less not really feel threatened for the majority of the playoffs, which ain't right, which, I don't know, if you're going to have a playoff type system where you're going to have an elimination round, nobody should be immune from being eliminated. But that's my personal opinion. Now, if you want to look at how to change it, what they need to do is go to, like I mentioned on the board, 36 races, 1 point per position. Now, there have been many models that have been released on sources such as racingnews.com, where they modeled it after the chase with the current format, after the playoffs without stage points, and then without the playoffs and without stage points. So it's just a basic 36 race season, 1 point per position, no stage points or anything in playoff points. And it was actually surprising how close majority of the championships would be. On average, they were within 8 to 10 points. And I'm talking within 8 to 10 points for the top 3 to 5 positions at times. Majority of the positions, though, the top 6 were within at least the 50-point range of actually making it into, making a 6-way tie, if you want to say, for the lead in the points. So I think that shows that there's very good potential in running with that point system, and then it reverts it back to the old-fashioned, you race all season, consistency pays off, and you don't just run lucky and get lucky at Talladega or the last cutoff race before the championship race at this year now, Phoenix, and get in, and then, I just happened to finish 15th, and the other 3 contenders just had problems or got in the same wreck. Well, how is that crowning a champion? Because that means the fourth best driver has the opportunity to win it, even though he statistically, wasn't doing, was in 4th. So now you're just putting it at the luck of the draw, and that ain't right either. So that's my first suggestion. My second suggestion on the board is change the racing format to the following: qualifying, heats, a B main, and a feature. Now, the qualifying and the heats could all be run on Friday, so then that way you're not having to run multiple, 2 days of qualifying stuff. So that way, if you have a triple header weekend, nothing's getting taken away from the Xfinity teams, and then you run your B main and your feature on Sunday. Now, the qualifying you would set your lineup for your heats. After then that would give you 2 heats with 15 cars each, which would be locking in 30 cars of the feature, or for the feature race. The top 4 from each heat will draw, or redraw in this case, for the pole position. Leaves it up to luck of the draw, who gets the pole, just like we do at our weekly dirt or track racing. Then on Sunday, in the morning, you run a B main to solidify the final 10 spots of the field. Now what this does is also eliminates the charter and guaranteed starting spots. Because now, if you're Jimmy Johnson, let's say this year, this means if you have a bad run in the heats, you wreck, and you end up having to be in the final 10 race for the final 10 spots, and there's 44 cars vying for a 40-car field, there is a potential that you could be one of the 4 cars not making the field. And you could also reinstate then the championship provisionals, so he would have his minimum number. I think that's 3 or 4 provisionals it used to be to enter a race. So that gives him that opportunity, But there again, it opens the field up to more cars because everybody's got an opportunity, to possibly qualify for a race, and make it in. And then on the feature, that comes later on in the afternoon at your normal starting time. And then also would open the door to cutting race length if you want, if they're too long. So like Bristol could be dropped down to 250 laps because you actually more or less have run 2 races that day. The other thing I would do is pay out a B main or consolation money to the B main participants, so that way no teams are going home without money. Just so that way those teams that don't make the field actually get extra money in return, just like we do here at the local dirt tracks. One option you could add to the points theory I have is you could also add in points for heat races in that point scale, so you could get a few extra points. But I'm not that much into that for this level of racing because you're not racing near as many days. You're not really racing that many different cars throughout the season. So that's what I think for how a race weekend should be set up, because this way you can, in essence, save race teams money. Because by doing this, you could actually theoretically eliminate practices on Saturday, which then gives the lower tier teams in the Xfinity Series the opportunity to go out and practice or have more time to themselves. I mean, unless you can more than surely implement this throughout all 3 series, but if you don't, that gives them the opportunity to go out and actually, practice themselves more, get more track time. But also, the reason why I like a system like this is it puts intrigue into everything you're doing on the racetrack. When I go to a race and watch, for instance, the World of Outlaws, they have qualifying groups that go out, qualify for quick time, and then each heat then is set up by quick time of them groups. So Group A, that's usually, the first heat. Group B, second heat, and so on and so forth. And that's how they break everything down. Sometimes they will run bigger groups, so then they split it's 2 heat races, per group. It just depends on how many cars are there. And then we turn around and run the heats later on, which then puts intrigue because now you're getting racing action on Friday night before the truck series go out and race, or if they're racing on a Friday night somewhere and that on a 3 truck, or a 3 triple header weekend with the Cup Series and stuff. So then that gives you that opportunity. And then also by having the B mains and the feature on Sunday, then you have the opportunity to give people racing all day on Sunday versus just sitting there for the morning until 11 o'clock or noon, or some tracks like Fontana 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon waiting for the race to start. This gives them a little extra reason to sit there and watch some racing. They'll be probably more apt to buy tickets because there's more action going on. I mean, you go to the local dirt track, if there's something going on with a lower division, sometimes people just don't stick around because it's like, well, I watch the late models, so I don't really want to watch these guys. I mean, I'm just, twiddling my thumbs. But if you do something like this and you add intrigue to the weekend, more people are going to probably buy tickets and sit around and watch a race. In that. Also, my final point I have on here on my board is relating to chassis. Bring back the minimum ride height rule. Now, there will be people out there that are going to say, well, they're going to just do something to their suspensions and they'll be able to get around it. Well, if you're policing the ride height, it ain't going to work that way. Because when you come in after a race, you have to measure a certain height, period. End of story. Before and after. And the biggest advantage is, if we go back to the ride heights, that gets the cars up off the ground, keeps the splitters from hitting, which then keeps the cars from really getting that aerial push, as it's called, when they come into a corner and load up, onto the front end and stuff. Because, like I said earlier, if you go into Fontana and you hit those ruts and you start bouncing, then you're gonna, have a hard time controlling the car, and you're not going to have the ability to turn, because your car is sitting on the body. It's not actually running on the tires. So if you go back to a ride height rule, you can start alleviating that problem, because then we got to get the body up in the air. The way you could police that is watch the cars when they're running and just say you have to be, usually what you would do is you'd put like a curved valence on it, that's thicker on one side, thinner on the other, so that way you can see if the car is actually, it holds the car up. It can't let it settle, completely even. They used to do that. We do it on dirt late models quite a bit. We have kind of thicker on one end, thinner on the other, because just the way the car is going to lean and that. So there's a way you can police it. I'll get into more of that next week when we, in the technical corner, when we discuss suspensions and what I think needs to be changed in the suspensions of the race cars to make them more competitive in that. But these are just kind of my main 3 points that I think need to be changed. Eliminate that playoff system, eliminate stage racing, and get back to a 36 race season where it means something again. Consistency pays off throughout the season, and the winner, is, chosen by the points, not by gimmicks, not by luck. 2, like I said, change the racing situation. Change the weekend formats. Try to make it more interesting. That's what they're already doing with the double headers, but now I'm saying now you don't need double headers. You're putting racing on the track every day. It's not just going out there for practice. You're putting racing out on the track. And you actually, like I said, you can eliminate some practices, because now the heat races act as practices. So you have that option. And then, like I said, eliminate the ride height rule, and things maybe can improve. And like I said, this is just a starting spot. Next week I'll talk about suspensions, what I think can be changed there to make the racing better. We'll talk more about how they could add more car counts, get more cars in. There again, offer a payout in the B main, so these teams are still getting something if they don't make the field. If you make the field, you get your regular payout that you would get on any race weekend. The biggest thing that's kind of killed the fields is you have to have a guaranteed starting spot or you don't get to race. Well, what's that done to Formula One? You don't see no cars show up and say, well, we're going to try to make this race. You have a livery stable, you show up, you race 20 some cars, that's it. That's all they got, no change. IndyCar is kind of the same way. But there's still a few pioneers or a few one-offers in the sport left that try the Indy 500 in a few races, and have to get their way in by qualifying and different things. But this is just kind of an idea on how NASCAR can kind of implement some of the dirt track racing. I wouldn't quite call them theories, but some of our rules that you can actually implement into the sport to actually maybe help put people back in the seats, because that's what makes it interesting. There's always something going on at a dirt track. There's always some class out there running a heat race or a feature or qualifying laps. So, I mean, it just gets everybody involved. It keeps everybody in, having fun and that. And if people are interested and they're going to sit, they'll be willing to sit there and watch. If not, well, they're going to just not go or not buy tickets and that. So these are, like I said, these are just some of the things I have for an idea. We'll talk more next week about ticket prices and a few things that I think maybe could change. Maybe some other ideas I can come up with. I'll find throughout the week regarding our local dirt racing sanctioning bodies, so that maybe there's other ways we can resurrect the sport. But I'm hoping everybody has a great Daytona 500 weekend and enjoys watching the race. If anything technical I can learn from that race, I will add to the technical corner. And that. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all again next week. And that.